My name is Austin Caldwell. I was told I was adopted, that I wasn't real family. I wasn't allowed at my grandmother's funeral, and I never expected a dime. But then a lawyer called. Mr. Caldwell, your grandmother left very specific instructions. We need to speak today. That same afternoon, I sat in a law office. In front of me, a letter in handwriting I hadn't seen in 20 years. My real name, Austin Thomas Caldwell, was on the envelope, the name they buried. Then I read the truth. You are not adopted. You are my grandson. I watched over you every step of the way. They thought they erased me. They thought they won. They were wrong. Sometimes the truth doesn't come early, but when it does, it rewrites everything. The number was unknown and the cereal in my bowl was already soggy. I almost didn't answer, but I did. And that changed everything. The spoon paused halfway to my mouth. The phone vibrated again across the counter, third time in 10 seconds. Unknown number. I let out a breath, annoyed, and finally pressed accept. Hello, Mr. Caldwell. The voice was clear and measured female, calm but formal. Yeah, who's this? This is Linda Carpenter. I'm calling on behalf of Caldwell and Birch Law. We represent the estate of Evelyn Caldwell. I blinked. For a second, I thought I misheard. The name twisted in my stomach like a knot pulled too tight. I think you have the wrong person. I said more reflex than logic. Evelyn Caldwell she was my grandmother. But I wasn't. She passed away last Thursday. The voice continued gently. You may have seen the obituary. I understand this is unexpected, Mr. Caldwell, but your grandmother left very specific instructions. I'd like to request a meeting with you today if possible. I was told I was adopted, I said quietly. I was told she didn't even consider me family. There was a long pause on the other end. Just the low hum of a professional silence. Then you absolutely need to come in today. The line clicked and the call ended before I could form another word. I stared at the phone thumb frozen above the screen. The silence in the apartment swallowed everything else. The hum of the fridge, the muffled voice of a local traffic reporter on the tiny radio. Even the ticking wall clock above the counter seemed to hesitate. I'd heard Marilyn scoff more than once over the years. When Evelyn dies, don't expect a dime. And I hadn't. After the adoption papers were signed and I was handed off like old luggage to friends of the family, it was clear I didn't matter. Not to Thomas, not to Susan. Not to Marilyn, the golden child with her pristine piano recitals and birthday cakes from Sweet Magnolia Bakery. I was the kid with silent dinners and secondhand shirts raised in a house that echoed with the phrase, he should be grateful. I took a long look around the apartment. Cracked linoleum floors, one functioning burner, a twin mattress on the ground that groaned when I moved. Rent overdue. Lights flickering when the fridge kicked in. The sum total of being forgotten. I rinsed the cereal down, the drain dumped the bowl in the sink, and wiped my hands on the same towel I used as a pot holder. My shift at the auto parts store didn't start until 4, but the meeting couldn't wait. Your grandmother had very specific instructions, Mr. Caldwell. The words wouldn't stop spinning. Instructions? That meant planning. Intention. I pulled on the least wrinkled shirt I could find and checked my reflection in the cracked mirror above the sink. My eyes looked tired. Not just from the overnight shifts, but from years of trying to matter. As I grabbed my keys, I paused. A part of me hesitated at the door. Not from fear, but from disbelief. The past had always been sealed shut like a rusted vault. Yet suddenly a voice from that past had reached through, twisting the lock. Outside, the morning sun glared off the dented hood of my '97 Corolla. I slid into the driver's seat and turned the key engine sputtering to life on the second try. I pulled out of the gravel lot and turned onto the main road, each mile away from the apartment, feeling unreal. The city blurred past. Billboards. Traffic. A woman dragging her child across a crosswalk. Everything kept moving as if the axis of my life hadn't tilted. The law office wasn't far, just downtown past the MARTA line. But the weight pressing on my chest made every block feel longer. What exactly had Evelyn done? Why now? Why me? I parked near a meter, checking the time. 10:46 a.m. When I finally stepped onto the sidewalk, my phone buzzed again. A message from Linda with the address. Suite 304. I stared at the building ahead, brick modest, forgettable. I stared at the phone long after she hung up. Something cold and electric buzzed in my chest. Evelyn hadn't forgotten me. But what exactly had she done? Linda slid the envelope across the desk like it weighed 100 pounds. My name. My real name was on the front, written in Evelyn's hand. I didn't reach for it right away. The office around me felt too polished, too measured. Bookshelves lined the wall behind Linda, filled with hardcover law books arranged by color and size. A degree from Emory, another from Columbia. Certificates framed in gold leaf. The scent of lemon polish clung to the mahogany furniture like old money. And there in the middle of all that sat a single cream-colored envelope. Take your time. Linda said, her voice softer than it had been on the phone. I picked it up. The handwriting was unmistakable. Sharp, slanted, precise. I hadn't seen it since I was maybe 5 years old, but the memory snapped into place like a key fitting a lock. Evelyn Caldwell was written in the return address corner, but that wasn't the part that made my fingers tremble. What shattered something deep in my chest was the name on the front, Austin Thomas Caldwell. The name they stopped using. The one Marilyn erased. I opened it carefully, unfolding the thick stationery like it might fall apart in my hands. Inside was a letter, 3 full pages, each word in Evelyn's hand. My dear Austin, if you're reading this, then I've done at least one thing right in my final years. I wish I could sit with you. I wish I could say this aloud. But time, as you know, rarely waits for wishes. First, you are mine. My daughter Jennifer was your mother. You were born in a winter storm so fierce the hospital lost power. You survived it with a cry so loud I swore the windows shook. You were everything to her. And to me. I stopped reading. Swallowed. The words blurred, then focused again. When Jennifer passed, Thomas broke in a way I didn't recognize. He remarried too fast. Marilyn had a way of making people believe their grief was an inconvenience. She wanted a new start without shadows. And you, my darling, were her greatest shadow. She told him to give you up for adoption. Said no man should raise another woman's child when he had a second chance at life. I fought her. I fought Thomas. But the law was not on my side. Grandparents don't get custody, not when the father signs you away. So I watched from the margins. I hired a man named Griffin to track your milestones. He never spoke to you. He never interfered. But he kept me informed. Your scraped knees, your middle school science award, the time you spent 6 months couch surfing after Thomas kicked you out at 17. I knew every heartbreak. I kept every photo. My hands clenched around the paper. The words were heavy, dense. I hadn't expected grief to come from a letter, but it bloomed behind my ribs like a bruise. They believed they could forget you. That by not speaking your name, they could erase your existence. But blood is stubborn, Austin, and memory is louder than silence. Let them think they'd won. I let them believe the inheritance was theirs. I watched as they spent money they didn't have. I watched Marilyn dig the financial hole deeper with every dinner party and real estate flip. They thought they'd bought your silence with distance. They were wrong. I didn't notice the tears until one hit the paper. Linda had remained silent the entire time, her hands folded, waiting. When I finally looked up, she offered a nod and reached for a file folder. There's more, she said. Things Evelyn wanted you to see. She opened the folder and turned it toward me. Inside photos. Dozens of them. Me, age 8, sitting alone at a school lunch table. 14, walking home from practice with holes in my sneakers. 17, loading a backpack into a friend's car, my first night homeless. 21, working the register at a gas station on the outskirts of Savannah. Receipts, transcripts, old apartment leases, medical records, case notes, dates, timestamps. A life documented in silence. I stared, heart-pounding, unsure what part hurt more, that someone had watched me struggle, or that it was done out of love. Linda opened a file folder and pushed it across the desk. Surveillance photos, receipts, reports Austin's life documented in silence. I hadn't been inside that house for over a year. This time I wasn't begging for textbook money. This time I brought a lawyer. The front lawn was still immaculate, freshly trimmed edges perfect. A pair of garden gnomes sat smugly by the walkway like sentries guarding a secret. The house itself loomed larger than I remembered, all white brick and black shutters, a suburban palace of curated appearances. Everything screamed money, or the illusion of it. Linda stepped beside me, her briefcase in one hand. Ready? I nodded, though my stomach churned. The door opened before we could knock. Marilyn stood there in a pearl-colored blouse, her smile stretched too tight. Her eyes landed on me and flickered. 1 second of unfiltered surprise before she masked it. "Well, this is unexpected," she said coolly. "Austin. And Linda Carpenter?" Linda said, extending a hand. "I represent Evelyn Caldwell's estate. We're here to speak with the family." Marilyn hesitated just a beat too long before stepping aside. "Of course. Come in." The house smelled like lemon polish and tension. Thomas was in his armchair, reading glasses perched low on his nose. He looked up startled as we entered. Kayla and Brandon were lounging on the sectional Kayla, sipping from a glass of wine like it was an award for showing up. I hadn't seen any of them since the night I'd been turned away at the door when I asked for help covering a semester's tuition and was told to get a real job. "Family meeting," Brandon asked, eyes flicking from Linda's briefcase to my face. "I'll get right to it," Linda said, walking calmly to the center of the room. "Evelyn Caldwell passed last week. Her estate is substantial and her instructions were extremely clear." "Wait, what?" Marilyn interrupted. "Why is he here for this?" "Because Evelyn named me her sole beneficiary," I said. Marilyn laughed. It was sharp and brittle. "He's adopted. Evelyn wasn't even blood to him?" I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the letter. My fingers trembled, but my voice didn't. I read, "Austin is my grandson. Jennifer Thomas's first wife was his mother. I loved them both. When Thomas chose to remarry and erase the past, I was forced to the margins. But I never stopped watching over him." The words hit the room like cold water. Thomas sank back into his chair, face pale. Brandon looked confused. Kayla blinked rapidly, lip trembling. Linda stepped forward and opened her folder. She spoke with the authority of someone who'd done this too many times to be rattled. "Here is Evelyn's signed statement of mental competency witnessed and notarized 2 months before her passing. Here are the surveillance logs, financial records, and documentation of her explicit intent to disinherit every other party due to a pattern of manipulation and emotional cruelty. The assets in question include the house you're sitting in, 3 investment accounts, and a family trust, all totaling approximately $2.1 million. Silence. "Then you can't be serious," Marilyn said, voice shrill. "Oh, I'm very serious," Linda replied. "And so is Evelyn." Thomas cleared his throat. "Maybe we should talk about this, as a family." Linda raised an eyebrow. "By all means." I looked at them all. My so-called family. Faces frozen between shock and entitlement. "She wanted you to believe I didn't exist," I said, "because the second you thought I might matter, you'd feel threatened. And you were right to." Kayla's glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the tile. Brandon muttered something under his breath, then louder. "This is bullshit." Linda's voice cut clean through the room. "The house, the accounts, the $2.1 million, she said. All of it goes to Austin. The rest of you $5,000 each, as a courtesy." Marilyn's face twisted. She lunged across the coffee table, snatching at the documents in Linda's hands. Linda didn't flinch. She stood calm and composed and held the file just out of reach. "Try contesting it, Mrs. Caldwell," she said coolly. "You'll lose, and you'll look pathetic doing it." The attic smelled of cedar and dust. In a box labeled spring decorations, I found the birthday cards Marilyn swore Evelyn never sent. The narrow staircase groaned beneath my steps as I climbed into the attic of what was now legally and utterly my home. The air was thick with memory and age beams of light breaking through the slats in the gable window. Everything up there was cloaked in a soft film of time cardboard boxes, plastic bins, and forgotten furniture that hadn't been touched in years. I didn't come up here looking for anything. I just needed to breathe. The box sat behind an artificial Christmas tree and a lopsided beach umbrella. It was taped at the corners, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Spring decorations. The label didn't match its contents. Inside, under a layer of pink Easter grass and faded garlands, was a stack of envelopes, everyone addressed in Evelyn's curling cursive. My name, Austin Caldwell. Birthday after birthday. Year after year. I sat cross-legged on the attic floor as sunlight pooled beside me, opening the first envelope. Inside was a card with a cartoon rocket on the front and $10 in crisp bills still tucked behind the flap. To my bright star on your 7th birthday. Love you always, Nana Evelyn. The next one had a sticker of a dinosaur, then one with a hand-drawn cake, then another and another. Some were creased, the ink smudged as if written in haste or pain, but all of them were unopened, all of them sealed away, hidden where I would never find them. I swallowed hard and kept digging. Beneath the cards lay a small wooden boat carved by hand, painted a dull navy blue. I ran my thumb along the hull. It had my initials burned into the bottom, AC age 10. I remembered it. Briefly. I had opened a birthday card that year with no return address and a note inside set sail, even if they tell you to stay ashore. I had thought it was a mistake. Now I knew it wasn't. Behind a row of dusty encyclopedias was a photo album wedged between forgotten tax records and an unopened fondue set. It was bound in navy leather brittle at the edges. The first photo stopped my breath. Jennifer, my mother. She sat on a park bench laughing, holding a baby boy in her lap. Evelyn sat beside her beaming. I flipped through the pages slowly, like they might break beneath my fingertips. Picnics, birthdays, bath time in a pink plastic tub, Halloween costumes, snow angels. Evelyn's handwriting was scribbled in the margins. My boy's 1999. That picture held the three of us. Me in a red hoodie. Jennifer in sunglasses, her smile full of summer. Evelyn standing behind us, arms wrapped around both. They weren't just pictures. They were proof. I turned the final page and found a small envelope tucked inside. Inside it, a folded page from a spiral notebook. Evelyn's journal entry. The date, June 12, 2008. Thomas said it would be easier for Austin if I stayed away. Marilyn made that clear. But how can erasure be easier than love? I watched from across the parking lot as he walked out of school with a paper crown on. I wanted to wave. I didn't. My hands shook. My throat tightened until I could barely swallow. They didn't just keep us apart. They rewrote the story so thoroughly that even I believed it. Every piece I uncovered in that attic was a refutation. They said she forgot me, I whispered. My voice cracked. But she remembered everything down to the brand of cereal I liked when I was 5. Later, as the light faded and I turned to descend the attic stairs, I saw one last envelope taped to the underside of the lid. This one was new. Dated just 4 months ago. I peeled it free, unfolded the single sheet. If they come crawling back, remember who walked away first. I stood there a long time, that note clenched in my hand, Evelyn's final warning settling like dust in my chest. I hadn't heard from them in weeks. Then came the email. Subject line, let's talk as a family. It landed in my inbox at 3:12 a.m. No follow-up, no explanation. Just those 7 words trying to reframe 2 decades of absence as a conversation starter. I didn't reply right away. I forwarded it to Linda instead. By noon, she had booked a conference room in her building and sent them a formal invitation. If they wanted to talk, we'd do it on neutral ground, with legal counsel, and no illusions. The room smelled faintly of pine-scented polish and printer toner. A pot of untouched coffee steamed at the far end of the table. I sat in one of the high-backed chairs, still and silent. Linda was beside me, her expression unreadable behind dark-rimmed glasses. The door opened precisely at 2. Marilyn walked in first in a beige turtleneck and gold earrings that glinted too much. Her lipstick was brighter than usual, her smile thin and trembling at the edges. Thomas followed, shoulders hunched, eyes darting around the room like a man walking into a trap he half expected and half hoped wasn't real. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Marilyn said, her voice too soft to be real. We, we've been doing a lot of thinking. I gave her nothing. She sat down across from me, folded her hands like she was in church. Austin, I know things were said, things done that hurt you. And Evelyn, well, she wasn't in her right mind those last few years. We didn't want to burden you with all that confusion. Thomas cleared his throat, finally sitting. What your mother meant, what we meant, is that things got complicated. Life does that. My jaw tensed. I didn't blink. They went on like that for 5 minutes. Marilyn's tone swelled with false remorse. She recounted childhood memories we never shared, claimed she had kept Evelyn's letters but hadn't known whether to send them. Thomas nodded, only interrupting to mention how hard it had been on him too. Then Marilyn said it. We were thinking she began reaching into her purse for a typed document. Maybe we could find a way to, share what Evelyn left behind. Not legally, of course, we wouldn't dream of contesting the will, but emotionally. For the family. I glanced at Linda. She didn't move. Marilyn pushed the document forward, some proposal of structured allocation full of fake concern for taxes and real concern for dollar signs. It reeked of desperation, cloaked in reconciliation. I reached into my briefcase. Evelyn's psychological evaluations, I said, calmly, placing the thick file on the table. 2 independent doctors, both signed and notarized, dated within 6 months of the will's execution. Sound mind, clear intention. I placed a second folder beside it. Surveillance records, financial statements, witness testimony, including the notary who watched her sign the final documents. They said nothing. You told me I wasn't family, I continued. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. You told me I was a burden, a mistake, that Evelyn pitied me, that my mother was nothing but a shadow you could erase. Thomas looked down at the table, but she didn't forget. She saw everything. And she gave me the one thing none of you ever did, truth. Marilyn's lip quivered. You taught me that love had a price tag. Evelyn taught me it didn't. No one spoke. The silence stretched, not awkward, but heavy, like a weight had settled on the table, pressing down every excuse and half-truth they carried in. Linda stood collecting the folders. Unless there's a legal matter to discuss, this meeting is over. Thomas stood slowly. Son. I stepped back before he got close. You can't undo 21 years with one performance. On the day I graduated, I left Evelyn's garden gate open. Not because I was careless, but because I knew someone else would come through. The spring air carried the scent of turned soil and blooming rosemary. I stood beneath a trellis, heavy with wisteria, my tie slightly crooked, the sleeves of my dress shirt rolled to the elbow. Around me, the garden at the new Caldwell Foundation buzzed softly with laughter, nervous conversation, and a tentative hope that felt too fragile to name aloud. I had just spoken to a small group, 16, maybe 17 young adults, all recent or soon-to-be graduates of the foster system. The folding chairs beneath them creaked when they shifted, but they had listened. Really listened. I didn't always think I'd be standing here, I'd told them. But someone believed in me when it made no sense to. Evelyn Caldwell gave me more than money. She gave me a second beginning. Applause wasn't thunderous. It wasn't meant to be. But the silence that followed that breath between words felt louder than any ovation. Afterward, a boy with a buzz cut and hands too large for his frame approached. 17, maybe. A cracked phone case peeked out from his hoodie pocket. He handed me a folded sheet of lined paper, no envelope. I don't really write stuff, but this is thanks. He mumbled, then turned before I could respond. I opened it once I reached the car. The handwriting was jagged, tilted hard to the right. You talk like someone who didn't get handed anything. That means I can be something too. His name was Malik. I smiled, gripping the wheel, letting the note rest on my lap for the ride home. The house felt different now. Not heavy, not haunted. The floors didn't creak with regret anymore, they just creaked. The air in Evelyn's study smelled faintly of lemon oil and ink. On the desk where sunlight pooled like honey sat a small envelope with my name in looping cursive. I hadn't touched it before today. It was the last of her letters when Linda said Evelyn had asked to be read only after he becomes what I already see in him. I slid it open with a letter opener that still bore her initials. My dearest Austin, you stood through storms they never knew you faced. That is your strength. You chose to stay kind anyway. That is your power. Congratulations on your graduation. Not from college, though I am so proud, but from silence. From erasure. Taped inside this letter is a family tree. I had to build it myself because they burned every branch that connected me to you. She was right. Names scratched out, some corrected in red ink, others annotated with stories I'd never known. At the top, Evelyn Caldwell. Below that, Jennifer, my daughter. And next to Jennifer's name, Austin Caldwell, my grandson always. Let this house become what they never gave you, a place you feel safe. Open the gate when you're ready to let someone in. Keep it closed when you need peace. But never forget it is yours to choose. Beneath her signature was one final line. You are the bridge between what was broken and what can be healed. I didn't cry. Not like before. But I did something I hadn't done in years. I laughed. Quietly. As if she'd made a joke only I could hear. Later that evening, I placed the wooden boat, still smooth from years wrapped in tissue, on a floating shelf in my study. Not tucked away. Not hidden. It sat beside the family tree and Malik's note. Symbols of things once fractured, now whole. The sun had dipped low when I stepped outside again. The garden was glowing in soft gold. Beyond the open gate, I spotted Malik and another teen tossing a baseball, their laughter bouncing between hydrangeas. Evelyn once tended herself. This is what legacy looks like, I whispered. And for the first time, I believed it. What they tried to erase was never truly gone. It simply waited to be uncovered by the one brave enough to look. Austin didn't raise his voice or seek revenge with fury. He held up the truth and let it do the burning. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. Sometimes reclaiming your name is the loudest victory of all. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth.